The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hopefully they can hear us. So welcome to this afternoon's ChemCareers webinar. We are coming live from Chemistry World Jobs in Manchester today. So we've got an audience in front of us, as well as those of you who are listening in today. So my name is Laura Woodward. I'm one of 3 career specialists at the Royal Society of Chemistry, and my role is to provide one-to-one advice, guidance and support to any of our members at any stage of their career. So that might be someone freshly graduated, it might be someone 20 years into their career looking to make a change, or it might be someone approaching retirement, planning that stage of their career. So we provide that support throughout the career. I'm going to get Ben to introduce himself now.
Hello, my name is Ben Carter. I am a careers consultant for the University of Manchester Career Service, and I there cover the schools of chemistry, chemical engineering, and earth and environmental science. I've been in the careers game for, I think, about 6 years now, having been a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Liverpool up until that point. I moved out of materials, something a bit tangential. So in terms of the support that I provide, if you happen to be a University of Manchester student and you're either listening in or in the room, then you can book in to see me for appointments. If you are a graduate from the University of Manchester within the last couple of years, you can also access my advice, but I'm quite happy to chat to people today. I'm not going to turn you away if you can't show me a Manchester ID.
Brilliant. So this afternoon webinar builds on 2 webinars that I've already done this week. So we've had one on Monday around perhaps just not knowing where to start and how to sort of start job searching, and then yesterday's webinar was around where to look and how to sort of maximise your job searching strategy. Today we're going to focus on LinkedIn and sort of networking aspect of job searching, particularly using LinkedIn for your job search. Tomorrow's webinar is on CVs, and then Friday's webinar is on preparing for interview. So all those webinars will be available probably sort of end of next week on our YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube, type in Royal Society of Chemistry Careers, we've got a whole channel there, and it's also got a number of our other webinars from across the year. So we try and provide you with some information about about types of careers. So we've had National Nuclear Labs have given us a talk. We've got people talking about their careers in academia. So there's quite a lot of useful information. So I'd encourage you to go and have a look at that. We'll have a bit of time at the end for questions. So anyone who's listening in online, as we go through, if you want to type in your questions, I'll sort of have a look at those. And anyone here in the audience, obviously, if you've got any questions, either as we go through or at the end, then please do ask them. So, just to technology work, just to sort of outline what we're going to cover today. So we're going to touch on why you'd use LinkedIn, so why you might choose to use LinkedIn as part of your, not only your job searching strategy, but just generally in terms of your career. We'll touch on how to create a profile, how to get the most out of LinkedIn, talk on about the networking aspect, and then also the job searching aspect of that. Before we start, I'm just going to ask people in the audience, list right in front of me, how many registered members they think there are in the UK on LinkedIn. So we've got 10 million, 15 million, 21 million, 36 million, or 42. Anyone want to have a guess? 10? 36? I think that is actually 21 million. That's just in the UK. So, yeah, it's a lot. I think people are always quite, like, they know about LinkedIn, they know it's something you should use, but perhaps are not necessarily aware of the impact or how many people are on there. Now, that's not to say 21 million people are active on LinkedIn, and that's where the value is.
I would say the single most common response when I ask people in careers consultations about, do you have a LinkedIn profile? Do you know what it is? I usually hear something to the tune of, I've got a profile, I don't do much with it. I see nodding in the audience. Can we get a quick show of hands as just roughly how many of you would say you fall into that kind of category? Yeah, there's a healthy proportion of the audience. Okay, good. So of that 21 million, hard to say what proportion are actually active, but my suspicion is it's actually quite a small number who could actually be accessing a lot more, just a lot more of the network, getting a lot more benefit.
Absolutely. And according to Fortune, there's 500 million users worldwide from over 200 countries. There's 10 million active job posts on LinkedIn, and there's data on more than 9 million companies. So, I never say to someone, you absolutely have to be on LinkedIn, but I think it's quite clear just from those figures that if you're not on the site, if you're not active, you're not utilising it, then there is a possibility to either miss potential job opportunities, but also more generally to miss those opportunities to network with people. Fundamentally, I mean, my colleague calls LinkedIn Facebook for grown-ups, which always makes me laugh. And actually, it's quite an important point that I like to stress. It was set up as a networking site for professionals, but since then it has massively developed, and in reality, it is now a huge online database for recruiters to job search for. So if you are not on there, there is the potential that you are going to be missed. And lots of recruiters don't actively advertise their jobs. They will be searching for people on LinkedIn, and so we'll talk more about why it's so important to have your profile on there, thinking about what you have on there. I don't really want to add anything to that bit.
Yeah, I suspect there's at least one person in the audience who either has or knows somebody who has been offered a job or an interview off the back of their LinkedIn profile. Again, I'm seeing some nodding. Certainly when I first joined LinkedIn, I suddenly found myself the object of some attention, and it feels great when people get in touch saying, we've got this job, would you be interested in applying for it? And so it does work that way. You can get people coming out of the blue having seen your profile, but I'd say you need to be at least a little bit active. You need to keep your profile updated, and ideally be doing things like posting occasionally, commenting on the occasional post that you see, that sort of thing, so that people notice that your activity is still live, that you're still an active user. So yeah, I'd say it is both an easy opportunity to get noticed, and I tend to tell people it takes the messy business of networking, and it takes out the factor of having to meet people face to face. So if that bit really puts you off the idea of networking, then be happy, because LinkedIn is here to help you. You can actually do a lot of your professional networking before you actually meet anybody in person.
Thinking about again, making the technology work, creating a profile. So I don't know whether everyone's got profiles or has a sense of what LinkedIn looks like, but there's some parts that I would say are the more important parts to get right. So the sort of the professional headline, which is it's bold text that sits under your name, and even your name. So think about that professionally. So I have my name, Laura Woodward, but I also still have Archer, which is my maiden name, because actually some people will still know of me or have worked with me in that. So think about that as well. But yeah, think about the sort of the bold text that sits under your name. So for most people, that may well be their job title. If it's not, if you're not working or you're, looking to move into something different, think about what you want that title to reflect. It's the sort of overview profile section is one of the most overlooked sections. But actually it's probably the most important because it's where recruiters find you. So really think about the sort of the key words that you're using. And what I often stress to people on their LinkedIn profile, in essence, the detail of your profile is really like your CV. So it's got that detail underneath. That doesn't mean your sort of top level overview needs to be a summary of that CV. They can see that detail. What it actually need to think about is what skills, what knowledge do I want to be utilising in my next role? And those are the things that you want to be highlighting. If you know, for example, you want to move into a role where you're doing project management, for example, but actually your CV doesn't demonstrate that, make sure you're putting that in there. Make sure you're backing it up with some examples. Don't just simply repeat back what they can see below. Put what things interest you, what you're motivated by, what you're interested in. So you get an overview, but think about what do I want to do next, particularly if you're job searching. If it's more for the networking side, again, think about what things that you put in there. Not everyone who is on LinkedIn is looking for a job. So you will use it differently depending on at what stage you're in.
And it's also worth knowing that LinkedIn will give you default entries for some of these things if you don't change them for yourself. So, for example, professional headline, that will usually change to whatever is the top entry in your in your experience section, if you don't take some steps to change that. Now, if you're online at the moment, if you're looking at your LinkedIn profile on a laptop or a desktop, if you go into the top section there, the header, and you go to your little edit pencil there, then one of the first things you can change is the headline.
I'll show you on here. Yeah. Hopefully most of you know what a LinkedIn looks like.
Yeah, that top section, it gives you the option to change the headline, and you should also within there be able to make small changes to things like the URL, the actual the address line that takes people to your profile. You can adjust that as well. So mine, for example, used to be linkedin.com/a random series of letters and numbers. It's now linkedin.com/Ben Carter Careers. So it just immediately creates something a little bit more attractive to put on CVs, things like that, as well as just being easier for you to remember as well.
There's a really good book by someone called Andrew McCarthy. It's a really short book, like quite thin, How to Build the Ultimate LinkedIn Profile. It was written a few years ago, but I think it covers the basics actually really well. And what he highlights that you need to be thinking about in your LinkedIn profile is tell them what you are, who you help, and how you make their work life better. So I know some of you earlier were in on my CV talk where I talked about don't make general statements, don't make sweeping statements about the skills that you've got to offer or the things that you can do. Exactly the same in LinkedIn. If you're saying that you've got a certain skill or you can do something, then back it up with specific examples, so that you're able to show anyone who's reading it, as it says there, what you're about, who you help, and how you've impacted what you've done so far. I don't know if you can go to that.
Yeah, I think we'll get into things like the summary section in a moment, just to talk about the things you can include there. One thing I'd say is that you've got to be able to sum up quite quickly what you've got to offer people, because I would say most people probably spend less time looking at LinkedIn profiles than they do at CVs, because you can just scroll through. You can very easily take these things at a gallop. And so making things easy to spot for people actually, I would say, becomes more important for LinkedIn, even though you would think, oh, surely I can provide more detail within my LinkedIn profile. Whether somebody's going to read all of that, you've still got quite an important prioritization exercise to do to make sure that the most useful things get noticed. And unlike a CV, LinkedIn has its own system. It has its own series of sections which you cannot change anymore. If you started using LinkedIn a few years back, you had more flexibility as to how things appeared, but no more. We'll get into that in a bit.
The other thing that I will just mention is make sure you include a professional photograph. So, I mean, LinkedIn themselves say it, but if you include a photo, you are 7 times more likely to be found in searches. And also, just generally, when people are looking, if they don't see a photograph, it kind of gives the impression that you've not really bothered, you've not completed the full sort of process of it, if you like. But make sure it's professional. So make sure it, sometimes I see pictures on LinkedIn and think, oh, bear in mind, it is a professional network. So really think about the sort of photograph that you include.
That sense of first impressions that you always try to cultivate in interview kind of applies here as well, that the second somebody sees your picture, they immediately start forming an impression of you. And some of the fantastic fails that I've seen in terms of photos, people who've got like more than one person in the photo, so you don't know which one's them, people who are clearly on a night out, people who call themselves social media experts and they have a blurry photo. The list goes on and on, pictures of pets. There's all kinds of really bad habits you can get into where and loads of people think you have to have something professionally done. You've got to go to a photographer to get this thing done. No, you don't. There's this wonderful device that people have now called a phone, and you can take pictures with it and just upload something. It doesn't take long. There's one other point I'd make about that, which I thought was excellent advice until recently. One very easy way to make your photo look classy is to turn it into black and white. Yeah. Really easy to do. However, I recently discovered, and I've had it verified by a number of my students, if your profile picture is black and white and you are active on the network in China, the assumption is that you have died if your photo is in black and white. So be careful with that, because I did have to go and get some independent verification for this. But depending on where you are going to be active, just bear that in mind, because I've got to admit, my photo falls into this category as well, because, yeah, I just think it looks great that way. But there are implications, cultural implications.
That's really interesting. But yeah, make sure you've got a photograph on there, make sure it's appropriate. So going back to that sort of summary section, absolutely essential that you don't leave it blank. So this really is your sort of top level overview, selling yourself to prospective employers potentially. If it's not about employment, it's more about the networking, it's about highlighting the things that you're interested in or things that you want to be involved with. So it's really important that you avoid buzzwords, so things like innovate, motivated, team player, problem solver. Go on, you need to say.
The absolute classic, which I've heard a number of employers grind their teeth about, was I'm a great team player, but I also work well independently. Yeah. So apologies if any of you have that in your profile or your CV, but it's one of those things that just those phrases which occasionally comes around too often, and so it starts putting people off the second they see it.
Absolutely. And give, as I said before, give specific examples. What I'd also recommend doing is, if you want to work doing a particular job title or in a particular field, start looking at people who work in those fields. What have they got written in their profiles? What things have they highlighted? As a way of just giving you some ideas and a sense of perhaps in that field what people would be writing in their profiles. My colleague calls it LinkedIn stalking, but I think actually it's a really useful way. It can be really useful just to give you ideas of how people's careers have developed. How has someone ended up being the chief exec at GSK? What did they do before that? What paths did they take? It would be really useful just to give you some ideas.
Yeah, I'd say that is a fascinating bit of LinkedIn, because you don't often get to look at the CVs of people who are further up the career chain than you. However, LinkedIn gives you all of that stuff. If they have an up-to-date profile, you can see where they've been, where they've worked, what kind of roles they've had. And as a source of inspiration, I think it's invaluable. You just won't get it many other places.
And also think about what you're trying to achieve by being on LinkedIn. So are you job searching, or are you just looking to network or build your brand? LinkedIn doesn't have to purely be about job searching. I'm on LinkedIn. I have, I've never used it for job searching because I've never needed to, but actually I use it for networking. And I'm also very, not selective, but I guess quite conscious about my network. So I don't necessarily connect to everybody who wants to connect to me. I am less likely to connect to someone if they just send me a random "can we connect," but I don't know who they are or how we're linked. And we'll talk a little bit later about sort of how you get the most out of trying to connect to someone. But think about, what is the purpose of me using LinkedIn at the moment? If it is around the job searching, really make sure that summary section is, the best it can be to sort of highlight the skills that you want to utilise in your next role.
You've got a couple of things to bear in mind when you start to write that, and one of them is that as people are browsing, they will only see the first 2 lines of that section, and you've got to then gear your wording towards the things which you desperately want people to see within those first 2 lines. It's quite a good prioritization exercise. And you can then, once you get into the bulk of it, you can start to go into a bit more detail, but again, try and keep it brief. I'd also say, there is definitely a need to explain what you're looking for, but don't feel like you have to stick to one thing. I think it's perfectly acceptable to say things like, I'm a final year chemistry student, chemical engineer maybe, looking for opportunities in pharmaceuticals, formulation, and or science communication. You can present a few different options. I doubt anybody is going to immediately turn away in disgust if you just present the idea that you're open to a few different career areas. Yes, they want you to be serious about them. At least you can explain a few different options.
I'm just showing the people online, just because someone's asked about it, about what section we're referring to, and I don't know. But really, it's this sort of top. And mine actually really just talks about what I do and what I'm interested in. But if I was about to start job hunting, I would edit that and I would focus on what are the cool things that I want to be doing in the next role. So hopefully for those who are tuning in via the internet, that was helpful. So do this. So I think one of the other things, just we talked earlier about 21 million users in the UK, but actually how many of those are actually on using it. I think some of the key things, certainly in terms of thinking about your network and building up your network, that should be something you are continuously doing as part of your career. You never know when you might need to look for a job, or just the networking and the conversations that you have with people, what opportunities that might open up for you. So it's always important, even if you're using LinkedIn to find a job, once you've found a job, still be active on that site. So post updates regularly, once a week, put something on what you've been up to or what you're doing, comment on people's things. So similarly to Facebook, anyone you're following or anyone you're linked to, their news will kind of show in your news feed. Comment on things, and actually that can be a really good way of connecting with people. I recently commented on a careers advisor down in Plymouth had written an article about something, and I commented on it, and she doesn't work in chemistry, but she put me in touch with a careers advisor who is at chemistry, and actually today my colleague is meeting with them. So it was just literally a random comment on an article, but it actually led to something really useful and practical. So comment on things, join groups. There must be millions of groups on LinkedIn. Things that you are interested in, join those groups, be active in those groups.
It's one of those things that people will notice in their own newsfeed. They will see what their connections, their friends, if you like, on LinkedIn get up to. And it's something to your advantage because people can just see the level of activity you're putting in. There's a point at which you might want to stop them seeing this because you don't necessarily want them to see everything you change in your profile, for example. It's actually where you can switch that off. And there again, if you're going to go into something like your privacy setting, so within the settings section, if you're using the mobile version, then it's just from your profile page, the settings cog in the top right corner. Or if you're using a desktop version, then it's just the user options. You click under your profile picture in the top line. You've got options for settings and privacy. If you go in there, you'll find a section for under privacy, sharing profile edits. And that is often set to yes, in that you let everybody know every small change you make to your profile. You can set that to no, just to let people avoid having people see every little change you make, because it might just be, you might be trying out different versions of things and seeing how they look. Not everybody has to see that.
And I think sometimes people panic. Oh, if I start changing my things on LinkedIn, my boss is going to know that I'm job searching. So it can be another way of just, not worrying about that so much. It might just be you're just updating profile and, but yeah, it's a useful tool. Be proactive in making connections as well. So again, in any group that you're joining, most people, I would imagine, start with the sort of obvious sort of friends, colleagues, and things like that. I have to say, I'm not connected to many of my friends on LinkedIn because actually we don't work in similar fields. There's no reason for us to be connected on LinkedIn. I'm connected to a few people, but not many. Mainly, I very much use it as my sort of professional networking site. I don't know whether you...
It's a strange balance because there will be friends of yours who you might want to actively have as part of your LinkedIn network because they are either looking for the same thing as you or doing something fascinating, and you want to have some link to them to see who their connections are, who your secondary degree connections are around them. So yeah, you have to gauge it based on the benefit to you and to them as well, because yeah, you've got to bear in mind it's a two-way process. Ideally you should be considering your connections and I guess what they get out of being connected to you. It's not always possible to do that because eventually you'll get to the point where your LinkedIn network is so large that you realize, actually, I don't see these people that often, or I've never even met some of them face to face, you'll discover. Don't be too shocked at that. I think it's just the nature of the network. But you've got to be aware that you've got to find the professional benefit to both parties to be connected with somebody. Just to return to a point you made before about that sense of stalking people on LinkedIn, one of the quirky features of LinkedIn is that you can see when somebody has viewed your profile. There'll be a thing which pops up saying such and such a person viewed your profile. And that works both ways. So other people can see when you have viewed their profile. Now, sometimes this is to your benefit. So if you've got an interview coming up and you want to take a look at who your interviewers are, you look them up on LinkedIn. It's a great way just to show that you're engaged in the process and that you are taking steps to prepare for the interview. However, there will be times you want to remain anonymous. And you can do that, once again, within those same privacy settings I was just talking about. There is an option to change your profile viewing options. And once again, in there, you can change it to completely public, half anonymous almost, where they'll just show what your title is rather than your name, or you can switch it off completely, just so you can browse without having to worry about people seeing what you're
up to. Going back to thinking about your connections, as I said earlier, never just use the default invite, which will often kind of pop up and it will tell you how you know this person, and you can just sort of almost tick box it. I personally get annoyed if I get those sorts of invites. If it's an obvious one, it's fine. But actually, even the less obvious ones, it's nice to know why someone wants to connect to me, what they're looking for, what the benefit of it is. So always, I would say, spend some time doing that. And there's a hates me. When you're thinking about what you want to put in that, do a bit of research around them. Why is it that you want to connect with them?
Yeah, I think that you've got to bear in mind that the person you're connecting to may not remember your name or your face from the time that you met them. So take today, for example. So the people in the audience who are here today are meeting people over in the Chemistry World Live Careers Fair, you'll probably be picking up business cards, getting a note of people's names from their name badges. If you're not doing that, please start doing it now. So you can go look them up on LinkedIn afterwards. And by all means, send them some connection requests because it will improve your network. But there is an option. If you're on the desktop version, you will always be prompted to, if you're in their profile itself, if you're in their profile, you click on connect, it will prompt you to add a note to it, which is very helpful because it may just remind you to do this. If you are elsewhere, if you've just got a list of search results from LinkedIn, if you just looked up the name, you see a list of people with the same name, they'll all have the option to connect to them. But if you click connect at that point, it will just rattle off the connection request without allowing you to add a note to it. So you've got to be aware of the quirks of the system here. Likewise, if you're using the mobile version, which for my money isn't as good, frankly, if you're going to network on LinkedIn, I'd thoroughly recommend you use the desktop version. It's just better, frankly. But yet again, if you try even from somebody's profile page on a mobile version to connect to them, it will usually just fire it straight off, unless you click on your three dot menu options. There you will find send a personalized connection. So yes, I can't stress how true that is, that you've got to have a reason for them to come back to you. So anybody in the room, if you'd like to connect to my profile, please do, but I expect all of you to send me a personalized message now. You heard it right here.
Likewise.
Yeah, I will connect to many people as part of my job. I will connect to most people without question if they are a student or graduate of one of the universities where I've worked. However, it's still nice to see a message every now and then.
You might be trying to connect to someone that you haven't met or have no obvious connection to. So that's when it's really important. And I think what I would say is don't assume that they'll ignore it. They might, but actually my genuine sense is that people do like to help people. And so actually, if you have taken the time to send someone something, and it's sort of personalised, and they're more likely to respond to it. So don't just. It's not like going through Facebook and add friend. It's not like that. You need to put the effort into it, really. And groups can actually be a really good way of building up that network. So there will be people in those groups that, from across the world. And actually it's a way of saying, actually, I commented on something you said the other day or an article that you wrote. And that can be a really, really good way. You can also create your own content on LinkedIn. So I've written a number of sort of careers sort of focused blogs on there. There's a whole section where you can sort of upload your own articles and thoughts. And again, it's a good way of sharing either on your news feed or in groups, and again, a way of sort of being active on the site.
And I guess the thing which will help to get that message looked at, because a lot of people are in a hurry, they don't always look at the message which comes with a LinkedIn connection request. If you can find some common ground, something like, I'm a fellow member of the RSC Northwest group on LinkedIn, something like that, or just something as simple as, great to meet you at the RSC's Chemistry World Live event the other day at the museum. Do you mind if I connect to your profile? That's it. That's all it has to be, nothing elaborate. You don't have to forge some great bond of familiarity with them. It can just be a case of, this is where we met, a quick reminder, I was that person who asked you about this thing. Do you mind if I connect to your profile? See where it goes from there.
We're going to mention the alumni element as well, weren't we?
Two things. One is that for those of you who are still students, PhDs, undergraduates, whatever it may be, there will be an alumni page, official or unofficial, for your university. Most universities have them. So find that group. There'll be a group for that university. Go join that, because it immediately expands your network enormously. You've got hundreds of people as part of that group, and they all become your second-degree connections as soon as you join the group. So that's thing one. Thing two is my personal favorite feature of LinkedIn, and it's something which not a lot of people know about, and it's the alumni tool. And if you Google the LinkedIn alumni tool, it'll normally take you straight there. If you need to find it from within LinkedIn, again, move away from the mobile version, because I don't think it works that way. But If you go in, you search for your university, wherever it may be, and there will be an official page for that university, not their alumni group, but just the page for the University of Manchester, the University of Liverpool, whatever it might be. Go to that page and you'll see one of the first options is a blue button up the top, See Alumni. If you click on there, you will find, for my money, the treasure trove of LinkedIn. And when you get in there, you will find it filters the entire network for graduates from your university. And in terms of common ground, you have hit pay dirt here. This is the thing which will give you common ground with hundreds of thousands of other people, so that your connection request can say, I'm a fellow chemist from Manchester, I'm a fellow earth scientist from Liverpool, whatever else it might be as your starting statement. Get into that alumni tool, it will filter for graduates from your university, then it'll let you filter them in other ways. It filters them, you can filter them based on where they work, who they work for, and roughly what they do are the first three options. But you'll find if you click on, there's a little next button on the right-hand side of the page. If you click on that, you will find an option to filter them based on what they studied. And this, as a source of inspiration for the people you could be applying to, I think is just magic. You can filter for people who studied chemistry or chemical engineering, whatever your poison is, and then you can do other things with it. If you want just to look for people who are actively involved in research, then you'll find there's an option for that. And in the what sort of work they do column, you can filter for research. You could filter for media and communications, if that's what you're interested in. You can also filter for when they graduated. You can set a year for, I'd like to see people who graduated in the last 2 years, for example. Again, in my opinion, they're far more likely to get back to you because they've just been through all of this stuff. So you can immediately start setting some easy things up to make the process of networking people easier for you. And again, it's something I hear from people lots and lots is, I don't know how to use LinkedIn. I don't know how to approach people. Fine. Go to a university's alumni page. It doesn't have to be yours. Incidentally, you can choose any university under the sun, but you choose yours and you've immediately got that common ground to allow you to make that connection request, put in the note to say, this is why I'd like to connect to you. This is what I'd like to ask you about. The alumni tool, I think, is a great thing. Go give it a try.
Just to finish off, I often get asked, people are perhaps not working, so they're unemployed, and obviously they still want to present themselves in a positive light to prospective employers. I mean, for me, all the same principles apply. It's still about highlighting the skills that you want to utilise. It's about backing up. But in some ways, it puts you in a good position because you can include the fact that you're actively job searching or open to new opportunities. Don't shy away from putting that in your profile. I think that's absolutely fine to include it. It also alerts your network that you are job searching, so don't sort of shy away from that. You obviously want to get the balance right. You don't want to be looking desperate or approaching everybody in your network to say I've got a job, but if it's not in there, people don't know, and if you're highlighting it, then people are aware of it. Obviously, if you're employed, you don't necessarily want people to know that you are actively job searching, so you would be more discreet in terms of what you're commenting on, or as we said earlier, you might want to turn off the fact that everyone can see you're updating your profile and those sorts of things. But I think it's absolutely fine to say you are actively job searching. I don't know whether you've got a view.
I agree. I think it illustrates an important point about job searching in general, is that the more people that know you are job searching, the better your chances are. And LinkedIn is a very good way of getting that word out, but you don't have to limit it to that. Tell people, shout it from the rooftops if you're happy to do so. Tell family, tell friends that you're actively looking, and you never know when somebody will just mention, oh yeah, I saw a thing, you should go look at this event, or I know a guy who knows a guy that happens to be looking. It's such a common factor in career development. So this sense of randomness, of the lucky things that happen to you, it actually has a name. It's called planned happenstance, and it's something which you can actually prepare for. Take a look for it online. Because there are five different steps that's recommended you put in place. Things to bear in mind so you can take full advantage of these crazy random things that come along every now and then. It's such a common factor in everybody's career path. Yes, you can plan, but there's certain things that will just come along and take you in random, wonderful directions in your career.
And networking is still one of the most effective tools for job searching. So as much as, you know, many of us think it's not something I enjoy, it is an essential part, not only of job searching, but as you said, that sort of career development and thinking about that. So we've got a few, sort of 5 minutes or so left for any questions. I've had a couple of questions come online. I think we've answered some of them. One of them, I don't know, Ben, whether you've got an opinion, is around, and it's something I get asked about a lot, is around LinkedIn Premium. So whether it's worth paying for the extras.
Has it been vastly beneficial? I'm not certain yet, I'm afraid. It is expensive. I can't deny that. Sorry, LinkedIn, if you happen to be listening, but it is a very expensive service. It is. And yes, it allows you to see more information. That's always a good thing. But I've gotten by quite happily without it. My major worry about premium is that eventually we'll move to the point where some of the most valuable aspects of LinkedIn, like the alumni tool, suddenly only become available through.
Yes.
Now, we've not hit that day yet. Because it's so valuable not just to job seekers, but also to recruiters. I could see it being monetized. But I hope that day doesn't come.
Yeah. Yes.
Online courses. So for okay, I must admit, no, I haven't.
Yeah, they're quite new, aren't they?
Sure.
I mean, for me, it's how much value an employer would place on someone getting a certificate from LinkedIn. For me, it's probably not that high in all reality. I mean, ultimately, employers are still going to be much more interested in the skills, knowledge and experience that you've got to offer. I think if that was the only reason you were paying for premium, I'm not sure it would be enough of a reason to.
No, sure. Yeah. I'd say in many ways, I think it can be a good supplement to your CV, but ultimately for something like a transferable skill like that, or even something more specific, I know lots of people are interested in adding things like programming, coding to their CVs, and there exist free online courses you can take in there. I'm often asked, okay, should I add things like that? And I would say, yes, do, but it's not going to be enough on its own. And that probably applies to the LinkedIn courses as well, that you've got to be able to prove you can use that skill.
One online's just asked as well if they can have a review of their LinkedIn profile by the RSC Career Service. Yeah, absolutely. If you are a member and you want us to have a look at it, if you want us to help you start one from scratch, we're very happy to do that. You just need to email us at careers@rsc.org. We can sit down and do that with you. That's not a problem at all. Has anyone got any questions in the room before we finish off? I'll go first. So, for me, more of the value, the endorsements are great, but they're for me, they're an easy, almost tick boxing exercise. And actually what the real value is getting people to write actual recommendations for you. And the best way to do that is to say to a colleague, oh, we've worked on this project together. Could you write a recommendation for me? I'll do one for you, you do one for me. The endorsements are useful, but I think they don't necessarily add the value of someone actually taking the time out. And, you know, going back to what I was saying earlier, you know, I'm connected to a few friends on Facebook, and I've had some of them endorse me, like on my training skills and my employment law knowledge. And I'm like, that's really nice, but I've never worked with you. You've never sat in front of me in a training course or come to me with an employment law issue. So it's, and that's where I think it kind of could lose its value. You could go out to all your contacts and say, can you endorse me on something, please? Actually, the real value is in those sort of personal, I did this with so-and-so, he was excellent at this, I really enjoyed his approach to XYZ, you know, we'll work closely together in the future. That's where the real value is. And actually, if you can have a few of those in your profile, I think it's in the top corner, it kind of gives you it's like a little circle, and it shows you how strong your profile is. And putting things like that in strengthens your profile. And the stronger your profile is, the more searchable you are when recruiters are job hunting for you. So it's not just about the keywords, it's the other things that give you that sort of strong profile. But I would spend more time getting just a handful of people to write a few. It's not to say people will still endorse, because it will come up and it say, oh, can you endorse so and so, and it's such an easy thing to just click. But I actually personally avoid it. I don't know what your view is, Ben.
It's one of those things where it is really easy to do, and you'll actually get prompted when you've connected to somebody, and LinkedIn will often say, okay, do you reckon they're any good at these things? Or just select some at random. And yeah, it's a similar story that I've had people endorse me for everything in my skills section, which is lovely of them, but they've never seen me use Microsoft Word or whatever it is. So I would far sooner they endorse me for the things which I've actually provided them with some help in, like peers advising or, you know, science or, you know, something like that. So yeah, I would say that endorsements have become a little bit devalued of late because of that. I'd agree with the point about recommendations though, because be very selective. I've only got 2 recommendations on my LinkedIn profile, and they're from the 2 bosses I had in my last job. And before that, I didn't actually have a LinkedIn profile. So I've got a very small number of them, but they effectively are your referees, you know, the people that you would want to speak up for you at some point in the future. There's one other point to make about the skills section where you get those endorsements. So those of you just getting used to LinkedIn, there is a section for skills. And this is where you can have these endorsements. People can just basically tick the box and say they are good at that thing. And you can rack up however many people say that you're good at whatever part of your skill set, whether that's analytical chemistry or careers advising, whatever it is. One thing I'd say for all of you people who are approaching this as scientists, populate that skill section. I'm not too bothered about whether you get endorsed for them, but it's your opportunity to include all of the things that make you good scientists. And that is to say, all the instrumentation, the analytical techniques, the styles of chemistry, the organic, inorganic, Nova-Nagel, condensation reactions, take your pick, just get specific in there. Because when headhunters go looking for people with a very specific skill set, these are the terms they're going to search for. And the people who have not bothered to populate their skills section, they won't come up as part of the search results. But you guys as scientists, this is a gift in order to make sure you get noticed. So yeah, populate your skills section as specifically as you can.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. You know, recognize that a recruiter will not always have the scientific knowledge or background or understanding. So don't assume that they will know because of your particular job title that you have got particular technical skills. You really need to highlight them. Good point. So we've run out of, I'll take one more question.
Yeah, you've got to time it right. Because yes, I think if you ask for a recommendation from your current line manager, then it does start to look a little bit suspect as to what you're going to be doing next. So again, to take my example, I only actually asked for recommendations from my previous bosses once I'd left that role. And yeah, I was long gone by the time I'd actually asked that question. So yes, you've got to be careful about whom you ask and at what point.
I've had people ask for recommendations from me once we're no longer working together, but they're actually they're job searching, for example. but you can still build up those recommendations, quite often through peers. So like I said, perhaps you've worked on a project together, both write a recommendation for each other. So you can still have that section on there. But yeah, absolutely sort of think about the timing of it and what works. Yes, of course you can.
As a general thing, those of you who are undertaking PhDs know that there is a publication section on your LinkedIn profile. If you didn't know, then great, now you do. But it's worth knowing that you can populate that with the authors, the abstract, all of that stuff, and a link to the actual the citation wherever it may appear. So it's a good place to collate your publications, your conferences, things like that. Conferences are slightly more tricky. You might have to just work within the LinkedIn parameters to find a good title for that. I think I use the courses section for mine to put conference attendance in there. But you can do it, and it can be quite a good way of pulling all of that stuff together to avoid having to put every single word of it into your CV. If you don't have something like a ResearchGate profile or some other place that pulls your research all together, then you can use your LinkedIn profile as a stopgap for that. Have all of that stuff in there, and then your CV can have a summary saying, X number of peer-reviewed publications, including these two. For a full list, please see my LinkedIn profile. Here's the link to it. It can be a good space-saving measure, a good way to use the system to your advantage.
Thank you very much, Ben. I learned a few extra little tips there that I wasn't aware of, so that was really useful. If any of you have any questions or something crops up, after today, you can email us, so just drop us an email at careers@rsc.org. And thank you for coming along, those of you who are here and those of you who are listening in. So thank you very much.